we had a research program to assist people to expand their awareness so that they could describe and experience what's happening in distant places or in future times. So if you only remember one thing that I'm telling you from the course of my talk today, there is no doubt that we all have the ability to quiet our minds and describe and experience what's happening in distant places and in future times, and the distance away from you does not interfere with your psychic abilities. It is no harder to describe something that's across the planet than it is across the street. It's no harder to describe a picture that I'm going to show you in a little time than it is to describe a picture in an envelope. We call that a non-local phenomenon. It's non-local in the sense that it's a phenomenon that takes place between things that are linked through time and space, independent of the amount of space and time separating them. Now, non-locality is surprisingly not a metaphysical idea. Non-locality is the most interesting, hot area of modern physics. If I was back at Columbia studying graduate physics, I would be involved in research in non-locality. In 1935, Einstein wrote a paper with Podolsky and Rosen, which is known as the EPR paper, or the EPR paradox. Einstein said there's something the matter with quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, he said, describes the fact that you can send two photons of light in opposite directions and grab one of them with a polarizer or collect one of them and it affects the other one. That's what quantum mechanics says according to Einstein, and that he felt would violate general relativity, which was his output in 1905 and 1914 and worked excellently. Special relativity was known to work perfectly. Quantum mechanics appeared to say that if you send these photons in opposite directions, they were still connected, which seemed to violate special relativity. And that's why it was called a paradox. And from 1935 until 1969, that was an open paradox. It was a puzzle for modern physics. Who is right? And as these things often turn out, both people were right. It's correct that these photons sent out in opposite directions are still connected. And in fact, the experiment done in 1969 was done by Friedman and Clauser at the University of California, Berkeley, on a tabletop. In 1985, the same experiment was done in Zurich by Nicholas Giesen, which was the definitive experiment. He had a laser on a tabletop in Geneva, and he sent photons to the left to Zurich and to the right to Basel. And when you turn the polarizer in Basel, you observe that something happens in Zurich, 10 kilometers away. So this is not a tabletop experiment. This is not a metaphysical experiment or proposition, and this is not a teeny-weeny physics experiment that takes place inside of an atom. This is a connection between two things that are separated by 10 kilometers. You turn a polarizer in Basel, and instantaneously something happens in Zurich. So this appeared to be a new breakthrough, a new phenomenon in modern physics, and physicists agree that this kind of non-local connection does in fact occur. So the good news is that Einstein correctly understood his quantum mechanics in predicting this bizarre, what he called a spooky connection at a distance, or a telepathic connection at a distance, which he did not like. He was incorrect in that it does not violate general relativity, you'll be happy to know, because you can't send a message using this technology. Because the photons arrive randomly, what you observe is that turning a photon in one place does affect the photons in another place, but it does that in a random fashion. So yes, there is a surprising quantum mechanical connection, entanglement between the photons on the left and the photons on the right, but it's not message sending capability. In psychical research, in remote viewing that we did for 20 years at SRI, we found that we had this kind of non-local connection. We found that people were surprisingly able to describe and experience things that are happening in distant places. And in a few minutes I will show you some of the data from that experiment, and then I will show you how to do it, saving you all thousands of dollars. So if you look on the internet right now under remote viewing in quotation marks, that is just for sites that pertain to remote viewing, there's 65,000 sites dealing with remote viewing. Most of them will teach you how to do that just for a few short weeks and a few $1,000s if you will come to their cottage, wherever it is. And it's not a scam, because they will show you how to do remote viewing and you will learn how to do it. The idea of non-local connections is something that has been with us since ancient times, since the Buddhist writings, the Prajna Paramita, the earliest Buddhist writings 50 years after the death of Buddha, has on every page the idea that separation is an illusion, that there is only one of us here in consciousness. Just as Jan Phillips was describing, there is only one of us. The oldest Hindu teaching that Atman equal Brahman predated Buddha by 1,000 years is an idea that says Atman, which is my awareness or my soul, is equal or congruent with all of space and time. Now that's a very extraordinary idea, since it's quite contrary to ordinary experience. And this was not an item of philosophical conjecture or experimental determination. It's something that was experienced by the mystics who had sit peacefully on a rock 1,500 years before Christ. And the experience was, and the basis of the Hindu theology, is that your awareness, your Atman, fills all of space-time, and you have the opportunity to participate in that. So that's the idea that's shown here, is that your awareness inside this egg has the opportunity to expand and take part in this liberation or this spaciousness. In the writings of Patanjali was 100 years after Buddha, he wrote a book, How to Know God, in which he describes how to get in touch with the part of yourself that's psychic. Now, Patanjali was not interested in ESP. Patanjali was a Dharma master interested in helping you discover who you are and expand your awareness. But he said, on the way to this expanded awareness, the first line of Patanjali's famous book, in the Sutras of Patanjali, he said, yoga is mind wave quieting. Where yoga is like being yoked. Yoga is a condition of being one with God. Yoga is a condition of being one with God.